My stepson falsely accused me of hitting him. So I left my wife. My marriage and family life is destroyed. So here's the thing. I'm 40 years old, been married to my wife Rebecca, also 40, for 5 years. She's got 2 kids from her previous marriage, Zach, who's 10, and Chloe, who's 8. I have a daughter from my previous marriage too. Lucy, she's 7. Everything's been mostly good. Like, we had the usual ups and downs, but we made it work, blending our families together and all. At least I thought we were making it work, until one day Zach just wrecked everything. It was a regular Tuesday night, nothing special. I got home from work and the kids were already eating dinner. I sat down, Rebecca gave me a smile, and we just started chatting about whatever, the usual stuff. Then, out of nowhere, Zach looks at me across the table and says, "You hit me." Just like that, no build-up or anything. At first I thought it was some weird joke. Like, kids say dumb stuff all the time, right? So I just brushed it off and was like, "What are you talking about?" But Zach wasn't joking. He stood by it, saying that I hit him a few days ago when Rebecca wasn't home. I was stunned. I've never laid a hand on that kid, or anyone for that matter. I don't believe in that kind of discipline. And besides, I've never even felt the urge to. So I said, "No, I didn't," and just looked at Rebecca, waiting for her to back me up. But instead of saying anything, she just stared at Zach and then turned to me like she was processing it. She didn't believe me. I could tell just from her face. I felt this panic set in. It's hard to explain, but it's like the room got smaller all of a sudden. I was stuck between wanting to defend myself and not knowing how to, because how do you argue with a lie like that? How do you prove you didn't do something when there's no proof either way? It was just his word against mine, and Rebecca's trust in me was cracking right in front of my eyes. "Are you serious?" I asked her, getting up from the table. "You really think I'd hit your kid?" She didn't answer directly, just said, "We need to talk about this." I tried to keep calm, but inside I was losing it. We went into the other room, and Zach stayed behind at the table with Chloe and Lucy, like nothing had happened. Rebecca shut the door, and that's when she started asking me straight up, "Did you hit him?" I said no, again, obviously, but she just kept pushing, asking me why Zach would lie about something like that. I had no idea. I still don't. Maybe it was attention, or maybe he was mad about something. All I knew was that I didn't do what he was accusing me of, and yet Rebecca didn't believe me. The more we went back and forth, the more defensive I got, and it just made things worse. She was in full-on mama bear mode, like I was the enemy now. Finally, I just snapped. "I'm not staying here if you think I'm some kind of abuser, Rebecca. I'm not risking my life, or my daughter's life over this." I stormed out of the house, not even knowing where I was going. I just needed air. I called my best friend Dan. I was pacing up and down the street, trying to make sense of everything. Dan's the kind of guy who doesn't sugarcoat stuff, and he wasn't having any of it. "Dude," he said, "you need to get the hell out of there. Now." I wasn't sure what to do, honestly. Like, this was my home, my family, and I didn't want to walk away. But Dan wasn't wrong either. He said, "Look, no one's going to believe you over a kid. It's not fair, but it's the way it is. And if things go south, you could lose Lucy." That hit me hard. It hadn't even crossed my mind yet that things could get that bad. But once Dan said it, I couldn't stop thinking about it. What if it escalated? What if Zach doubled down and said something worse, or Rebecca went to the police? It would be his word against mine, and I had no idea how that would play out. I walked around the block for what felt like hours, my mind racing. I knew deep down what I had to do, even though it felt like ripping my life apart. Eventually, I went back to the house. Rebecca was still sitting in the living room, and Zach had gone to bed. I told her we needed to talk, like, really talk. I sat her down, took a deep breath, and said, "Look, I didn't hit him. I don't know why he's saying that, and at this point, I don't even care why anymore. What I do care about is that I don't feel safe in this house." She looked at me like I'd just slapped her across the face. "Safe? What do you mean you don't feel safe?" "I mean, if you don't believe me, I can't stay here. If you're already on his side, how long until something worse happens? What if Zach says something else? Something that could ruin my life or take Lucy away from me?" I could feel my voice shaking. "I can't risk it." Rebecca just sat there, silent. I think she knew I was right, but she didn't want to admit it. I tried to stay calm, but inside I was a mess. I told her I understood why she was protecting her son, and I didn't blame her for that. But I wasn't going to stick around and wait for the next accusation to happen. The last thing I wanted was to be near someone who could turn on me at any moment. I packed a bag for me and Lucy. Rebecca didn't stop me, didn't even say anything. I think she was still in shock, honestly. As I walked out the door, I told her, "We can talk later, but for now, I need space. I need you to only contact me through text, no calls." She just nodded. I left without looking back. That night, Lucy and I stayed at my parents' place. I didn't tell Lucy the full story, just said we were visiting Grandma and Grandpa for a little while. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. My mind kept replaying the conversation over and over, wondering how we got here. How did a kid's lie destroy everything? It was like I could already see the road ahead, and it didn't look good. Things were never going to be the same. After leaving, things got really quiet. Rebecca and I barely spoke for the first few days. It's like we were both walking on eggshells. I'd hear my phone buzz with a message from her, and my stomach would drop every time, wondering what kind of crap she was going to throw at me now. But to be honest, the texts weren't anything like I expected. At first, Rebecca was all over the place. I don't blame her. I mean, one second she was pissed, then she was apologizing, and then she'd send me a wall of text asking to meet and talk things out. It was exhausting. I'd read her messages, but most of the time I didn't respond right away. I didn't know what to say. What was the point of talking in circles if she wasn't going to believe me? The weirdest thing, though, was how quickly she went from blaming me to blaming herself. It was like a switch flipped. One minute, she was saying, "I'm just trying to protect my son." And the next, it was, "Maybe I overreacted. Maybe I didn't think it through." But by then, the damage was already done. Honestly, I don't think she even knew what she wanted. Part of her was probably thinking she could smooth it over, act like things could go back to normal if we just talked. But there was no going back. Not after she looked me in the eyes and doubted me like that. The problem is, once you cross that line, you can't just uncross it. Those first few weeks after I left were brutal. I was stuck between trying to protect myself and wondering if I was doing the right thing by walking away. I missed Rebecca, sure, but every time I thought about her, I saw that moment in my head when she sided with Zach without even hearing me out. It was like this tape playing over and over in my brain, and I couldn't turn it off. Lucy adjusted way better than I thought she would. She didn't ask a lot of questions, which I was thankful for. I just told her we were staying with Grandma and Grandpa for a while, and she accepted it. Kids are way more resilient than we give them credit for. I tried to keep things as normal as possible for her. We'd go to the park, play games, keep up with her schoolwork. I wanted her life to feel steady, even though mine was unraveling. Meanwhile, Rebecca's texts kept coming in, and they started getting desperate. She was saying things like, "I miss you," and "We can fix this." But how do you fix something like that? How do you just move past the fact that she was willing to believe her son's lie without even blinking? I told her the same thing every time. I'm not coming back until I know it's safe for me and Lucy. That was the bottom line. No matter how much I missed her, I couldn't risk everything on her just deciding to trust me again. That kind of trust doesn't just snap back like a rubber band. The moment everything shifted. Then one day, about 3 weeks after I left, I get a message from Rebecca that made me freeze. It was different from all the others. She said, "I believe you now." Just like that. It was so out of the blue I had to read it a few times to make sure I wasn't imagining it. Apparently, after I left, she started thinking more about what Zach said and how he said it. She noticed some things that didn't add up. His story kept changing, and the more she pressed him, the more inconsistencies popped up. Eventually, she realized that Zach had been lying the whole time. I should have felt relief, right? I mean, that was what I'd been waiting for. But honestly, I didn't feel relief at all. I felt angry, furious even. Like, great, now you believe me. But where was that doubt when it actually mattered? Where was that critical thinking when you were accusing me of something so serious? You believed him over me without even questioning it. And now I'm supposed to just be okay because you've suddenly figured out the truth? Rebecca apologized in her texts, over and over. She begged me to come home. She said she was sorry for not believing me, that she knew she'd messed up, and she wanted to fix things. But I wasn't so sure I wanted to be fixed anymore. I knew I had to respond, but I didn't know what to say. There was no way I could just go back, pretend like nothing happened. My trust in her was shattered. And it wasn't just about the lie. It was about the fact that she could believe something so damaging about me that easily. How do you come back from that? So I texted her back and I said, "I'm glad you believe me now, but I can't risk it happening again. I can't trust Zach. And to be honest, I don't trust you either. I don't want to live in a house where I'm constantly worried about being accused of something like that again." Her response was heartbreaking. She asked me what I wanted her to do. She said she'd do anything to make it right, and I knew she meant it. But the truth was, I didn't know if anything could make it right. She asked me if I wanted her to give up custody of Zach and Chloe. That was something I hadn't even considered. I never thought it would come to that, but now that she mentioned it, I couldn't shake the idea. If Zach wasn't in the house, I wouldn't have to worry about another false accusation. But what kind of person would I be if I asked her to give up her kids for me? I told her I loved her, and I did. Still do in a way. But I also told her that I couldn't live in that house with her kids. I didn't trust it. I didn't trust them. I said I wasn't expecting her to give up her kids for me, but I couldn't see another way for us to move forward. It was this impossible choice, and I knew no matter what, someone was going to lose. When I hit send, I didn't know how she'd react. Would she be angry, hurt, beg me to reconsider? But what she said next was something I never saw coming. She was actually considering it. Rebecca said she'd thought about giving up custody of Zach and Chloe so we could stay together. I was stunned. This wasn't some off-the-cuff comment. She was seriously thinking about it. She wanted to make it work that badly. It didn't feel right, though. I mean, how could I let her do that? Her kids needed her, even if Zach had lied. And what kind of relationship would we have if it was built on something like that? It was a no-win situation. Update 1. So, here's the thing. When Rebecca told me she was actually considering giving up custody of Zach and Chloe, I didn't know how to feel. Like, this was a whole new level of messed up. On one hand, a part of me felt relieved that maybe there was a solution to all this mess. But the other part? I felt like absolute shit for even entertaining the idea. I never wanted Rebecca to give up her kids for me. I mean, what kind of person would I be if I asked her to do that? But the fact that she was thinking about it, that threw me. It was like she was willing to make the ultimate sacrifice just to keep me around. I couldn't wrap my head around it. A few days went by, and I was still processing everything. We were texting back and forth, but I was keeping my distance. Meanwhile, Rebecca's ex-husband, Kyle, caught wind of what was going on, and let's just say he was not happy. Out of nowhere, I get a call from Kyle. I didn't even recognize the number at first, so I let it go to voicemail. Big mistake. The message he left? Pure anger. I'll never forget his voice. He was furious, asking why the hell his ex-wife was talking about giving up custody of the kids and what kind of shit was going on in our house. At this point, I knew I had to talk to him. I couldn't avoid it. So I called him back, and the second he picked up, it was like I was being hit by a freight train of questions. He was pissed, and honestly, I didn't blame him. Kyle, what the hell is going on, man? Why is Rebecca saying she might give up the kids? Zach and Chloe are my children too. You don't just make decisions like that without talking to me. Me. Look, Kyle, it's complicated. Zach accused me of something that didn't happen, and it's thrown everything into chaos. I never wanted Rebecca to give up custody, but after what Zach did, I can't go back to that house. Kyle was silent for a second, and I could tell he was piecing everything together. Kyle. So, Zach lied? That's what this is about? Me. Yeah, that's the gist of it. Rebecca believed him at first, but now she knows it was all made up. But it's too late, man. The trust is gone. I can't live there with them, not after what happened. Kyle let out a long sigh, and for a second, I thought he was about to blow up again. But instead, he just sounded tired. Kyle. I can't believe this is happening. Zach? He's a good kid, but I don't know what's gotten into him lately. He's been acting out, but this is beyond anything I imagined. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't in the business of psychoanalyzing a 10-year-old. All I knew was that Zach's lie had wrecked everything. Kyle. Look, I'm angry, but I get where you're coming from. I don't want my kids in the middle of this mess either. But Rebecca giving up custody, that's not happening. I didn't argue with him. Honestly, I was glad he felt that way. The last thing I wanted was for Rebecca to go through with something she'd regret for the rest of her life. We agreed to leave it at that for now, and I hung up feeling like I'd just dodged a bullet, but also knowing that nothing had really been solved. A few days later, Rebecca texted me again. This time, it was different. There was no apology, no back and forth about custody. She wanted to meet in person. She said she needed to talk face-to-face, no more texting. I wasn't sure I was ready for that. I mean, yeah, we'd been married for 5 years, but seeing her in person after everything felt like too much. Still, I agreed, mostly because I didn't see how we could keep texting forever. We had to face each other at some point. We met at a park halfway between my parents' place and the house. When I got there, she was sitting on a bench, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her eyes were red, and she had this desperate look on her face. I sat down next to her, leaving enough space between us that it didn't feel too close. Rebecca. I'm losing everything. I can't do this anymore. I didn't know how to respond. What do you say to that? I felt like I'd already lost everything too. Me. I'm sorry, Rebecca. I didn't want it to be like this. She just shook her head and looked away, tears starting to well up in her eyes. Rebecca, I can't believe my own son lied like that. I can't even look at him right now. He's staying with Kyle full time, and I don't even know when I'll see him again. There it was, the raw truth. Rebecca was falling apart, and Zach had wrecked not only my life but hers too. I didn't want to see her like that, but at the same time, I couldn't forget what she'd done. She had doubted me when I needed her trust the most. Me. Look, I don't know what to say. I'm not sure there's anything to fix here. I can't come back. Not with Zach in the picture. Rebecca. But I need you. And now... She paused, taking a deep breath. I'm pregnant. My heart stopped. I wasn't expecting that, not even close. I just stared at her, trying to process what she'd said. Pregnant? Now? In the middle of all this? Me. How far along are you? Rebecca. 12 weeks? I just found out a few days ago. I didn't even know what to say. It felt like everything had just gotten 100 times more complicated. Rebecca. I'm scared, okay? I don't want to go through this alone. I'm sorry for everything, for not believing you, for all of it, but please don't leave me now. I could see the panic in her eyes, and for a second, I felt guilty. Like maybe I was abandoning her. But then I remembered everything we'd been through, everything Zach's lie had done. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about protecting Lucy and myself, too. Me. I'm sorry, but I can't do this. I can't come back and pretend everything's fine just because you're pregnant. We're still getting a divorce. Rebecca's face crumpled, and for the first time in a long time, I saw her break down completely. She cried, and I just sat there, watching her. There was nothing else I could do. I felt like the worst person in the world, but I knew I had to stand my ground. After that, we sat in silence for a while. I didn't know what else to say, and she didn't either. Eventually, I stood up and told her I had to go. She didn't try to stop me. I think she knew that things were beyond fixing. As I walked back to my car, I felt like something inside me had finally snapped. This was it. There was no going back, no second chances. I'd done everything I could, but in the end, it wasn't enough. I drove home feeling numb, like my entire world had collapsed. And maybe it had. Update 2. The days after that conversation at the park felt unreal, I guess. I mean, here I am, dealing with a divorce, a false accusation from a kid I thought I was starting to connect with, and now, a baby on the way. It was like life kept throwing stuff at me, and I was just standing there, taking it. I kept telling myself to stay strong for Lucy, but it was hard. Rebecca and I didn't talk much after the park. We went back to texting, but it was different now. The tone was off. She wasn't begging me to come back anymore. Instead, she was resigned. Like she'd finally accepted that this was happening, that our marriage was really over. The divorce papers were already in motion. We'd both agreed to keep things as civil as possible for the kids' sake. But no matter how calm we tried to stay, there was still this huge elephant in the room. The baby. I didn't know how to feel about it. One part of me wanted to be excited, you know? A baby is a big deal, and under normal circumstances, I probably would have been over the moon. But these weren't normal circumstances. Not even close. I was angry, confused, and honestly scared out of my mind about how this was going to play out. Co-parenting with Rebecca was already going to be complicated with Lucy, and now we were adding a newborn to the mix? I tried not to think too much about the future, though. I was focused on getting through each day, one at a time. I had to make sure Lucy was okay, that she wasn't affected by all the chaos going on around her. A week or two after our talk, Rebecca sent me a long message about Zach. She told me that their relationship had completely fallen apart since the whole incident. Zach had moved in with Kyle full-time, and Rebecca barely heard from him anymore. She tried calling, texting, even showing up at Kyle's place, but Zach wanted nothing to do with her. Honestly, I wasn't surprised. Kids can be ruthless sometimes, and Zach was probably feeling the weight of his lie. He knew what he'd done, and now that everything was out in the open, it was like he couldn't face the consequences. So, instead of trying to fix things with his mom, he just disappeared. I felt bad for Rebecca, though. No matter what happened between us, I didn't want her to go through that. No parent deserves to be cut off from their kid like that, especially not when they're still so young. She told me she was heartbroken, that she didn't know how to fix it. I didn't have any advice to give her. What could I say? She'd believed Zach when he told the lie, and now that the truth had come out, their relationship was shattered. It wasn't like I could swoop in and make everything better. If anything, I was part of the reason things were broken in the first place, even though I didn't ask for any of this. There were moments when I'd sit and think about everything that had gone down, and I'd get hit with this overwhelming guilt. I knew it wasn't really my fault, but it felt like it. Rebecca was losing her relationship with Zach, and she was going to have to go through this pregnancy alone. She had to deal with a divorce, raising Chloe, and managing a broken relationship with her son, all at the same time. I kept replaying that moment in the park, when she told me she was pregnant, how scared she looked. And now, here I was, living at my parents' place with Lucy, and Rebecca was left to pick up the pieces. It was hard not to feel responsible for some of it, even though I knew it was Zach's lie that started all of this. But that's the thing about guilt. It doesn't care about logic. I didn't reach out to Rebecca to talk about it, though. I kept my distance. I figured the less we talked, the easier it would be to get through the divorce and move on. But that didn't stop the guilt from creeping in, especially at night when I was alone with my thoughts. After a few more weeks, things started to settle down a bit. The legal stuff was moving along, and Rebecca and I had come to an agreement about Lucy. We'd share custody, and I'd make sure to stay involved as much as possible. It wasn't the perfect setup, but it was better than nothing. Rebecca was still struggling with Zach, though. She'd tried to reach out again, but Kyle wasn't having it. He was still pissed about the whole custody conversation, and I couldn't blame him. If the roles were reversed, I would have been just as angry. Rebecca told me she hadn't seen Zach in over a month. He was ghosting her, and she didn't know how to handle it. She even tried talking to Chloe about it, but that just made things worse. Chloe was confused and upset about everything, and she didn't want to be stuck in the middle. The whole family dynamic had completely fallen apart. I didn't know how to help. I wasn't in a position to offer advice or be there for Rebecca in the way I used to. I had to focus on Lucy, on building a stable life for the two of us. But still, hearing Rebecca's messages, it was like a punch to the gut. I could hear the pain in her words, and I hated that I couldn't do anything about it. Rebecca's pregnancy continued to be the big, looming thing in the background. Every few days, she'd update me on how she was feeling, how the baby was doing. It was weird, knowing that I was going to be a dad again, but not being part of the process like I was with Lucy. I wasn't going to be there for the doctor's appointments, the ultrasounds, or even the birth. It felt disconnected, like I was watching it all from the outside. We talked a little about how we'd handle things once the baby was born. Co-parenting was going to be tricky, especially since we'd be living apart, but we agreed that we'd figure it out as we went. We didn't have much of a choice. Rebecca said she'd do everything she could to make sure Zach didn't cause any more problems. But even with that promise, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was too little, too late. The damage had already been done. I guess looking back, this whole thing feels like a slow-motion train wreck. I didn't want any of this to happen, but once it started, there was no stopping it. One lie from Zach, and my entire life flipped upside down. Now here I am, trying to pick up the pieces and figure out what comes next. Rebecca's about to give birth to a baby we'll have to co-parent while we go through a divorce. Zach is barely in the picture, and Lucy is the only thing keeping me grounded. All I can do is keep moving forward and hope that, someday, things get better. Update 3. The day I officially got the divorce papers in my hand was the weirdest feeling. I'd been expecting it, waiting for it, but when it actually arrived, I just stared at the envelope for a while. I wasn't even sure why it hit me so hard. It wasn't like it was a surprise. Rebecca and I had both agreed this was where we were headed. Still, it felt like the final nail in the coffin of a life I thought I'd be living for a lot longer. I didn't open the envelope right away. I just left it on the kitchen counter and went about my day trying to distract myself with Lucy. She's so intuitive, that kid. She could sense something was up, even though I was putting on my best everything's fine act. She kept asking me if we were still going to the park later, like she was testing to see if the plan was still on. I promised her we'd go, no matter what. It's moments like that when you realize how much kids pick up on, even when you think you're hiding things well. She didn't know about the divorce yet, not the full picture anyway. I told her that her mom and I weren't going to live together anymore, but explaining the why of it all, I wasn't sure how to do that without dumping adult problems on her. She didn't need to know the specifics. She just needed to know I was there for her no matter what. Rebecca's struggles. Meanwhile, Rebecca was in her own world of chaos. She was dealing with the final stages of pregnancy, the divorce, and trying to fix her relationship with Zach. I'd hear bits and pieces from her through texts, mostly about how difficult it had become to even get Zach to respond to her. He was still living full-time with Kyle, and from what she told me, he was barely talking to her. I didn't say much when she'd vent about it. I mean, what could I say? It wasn't like I could swoop in and fix that relationship for her. Zach had made his choices, and Rebecca was dealing with the fallout. I felt for her, honestly. I might have been pissed at her for how everything went down between us, but no parent deserves to lose their relationship with their kid. And from what I could see, Zach wasn't budging. There were even a couple of times when Rebecca hinted that maybe I could talk to Zach, try to help patch things up. But that was a non-starter for me. I told her straight up, "That's between you and him. I can't get involved." I didn't want to make things worse by sticking my nose into that mess. Zach had already made his feelings clear about me, and I wasn't about to jump into that fire again. When Rebecca's due date finally came around, I wasn't there. That was the hardest part. With Lucy, I was at the hospital, right by Rebecca's side, holding her hand the whole way through. This time, I was sitting at my parents' place, waiting for a text to let me know it was over. I'll never forget that feeling, knowing that my child was being born, but I wasn't there. I kept pacing around the house, checking my phone every 5 minutes, waiting for an update. Finally, around 3 a.m., I got the message. "He's here." It was a boy, my son. I didn't know what to feel. There was this rush of happiness. Because let's be real, a new life coming into the world is always something to celebrate. But there was also this pit in my stomach, like I was already missing out on so much. I wasn't there to hear his first cry. I wasn't there to hold him for the first time. Rebecca sent me a photo of him a little later. He was tiny, wrapped up in one of those hospital blankets with a little hat on his head. He was perfect, and I wasn't there. The first few weeks after the baby was born were complicated. Rebecca and I were trying to figure out how to co-parent, but it was messy. She needed help, but I wasn't living there anymore, and I had Lucy to think about too. There was this constant back and forth about when I could come over to see the baby, how often I'd be involved, what was fair, and all that. I went over a few times to help, but it was awkward. There was this wall between us now. We weren't just parents anymore. We were divorced parents. Every interaction was tinged with this unspoken tension, like we were both just trying to get through it without bringing up all the crap that led us here. But holding my son for the first time? That was something else. He was so small, and I just kept thinking about how much I'd missed already, even though he'd only been around for a couple of weeks. I wanted to be there for him, to be the dad he needed. But how was I going to do that from a distance? Co-parenting with Lucy was already hard enough. Adding a newborn to the mix made it feel impossible. Rebecca was still dealing with Zach's absence, and it was weighing on her. She tried to hide it, but I could see how exhausted she was. She'd talk about how she didn't know how to juggle everything, being a mom to Chloe, raising a newborn, and trying to fix things with Zach. I didn't have the answers, and I wasn't in a position to offer much support beyond being there for the baby. After a couple of months, things started to settle into a weird kind of normal. Rebecca and I worked out a routine for sharing time with the baby, and Lucy was adjusting to the new situation. I'd have Lucy with me most of the time, and then I'd go over to Rebecca's to see the baby a couple of days a week. It wasn't ideal, but we made it work. There were still plenty of moments where I felt disconnected, like I was only getting bits and pieces of my son's life. But that was the reality now. I had to accept that I couldn't be there every second, that I had to let go of the idea of a normal family. Because nothing about this was normal. Lucy, though, she was a rock star through it all. She took to being a big sister like it was second nature, and seeing her with the baby brought a little bit of light into the mess. She didn't care about the divorce or the custody stuff or any of the adult drama. All she cared about was her baby brother, and that was enough for her. Now, looking back at everything that's happened, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. One false accusation, and everything unraveled. My marriage, my family, my life, it's all been flipped upside down. But somehow I'm still standing. I've got Lucy, I've got my son, and I'm trying to build something out of the wreckage. It's not perfect, and it probably never will be. But it's the life I've got now, and I'm doing my best to make it work.